All right, welcome back to the Hive. I'm Cami,
And I'm Caleb.
and we're the Beesons.
Well, welcome to the show. We're excited to do another episode. Thank you for those of you who listened to the first episode.
Yes.
Very exciting to see the growth and to see the excitement behind it.
That people actually care.
Yeah. We thought we might get like 2 listeners.
That would be like our family.
Yeah, and we got a lot of listeners, and so we're pretty pumped about it.
We appreciate it.
And so thank you so much for listening, and we hope you stick with us. And
yes.
Promise this episode's going to be a little bit juicier than the last one, and so we got some exciting things that we're going to talk about. But first off, we're going to talk a little bit about our week that we had. It was my birthday week. I had turned 32 on the 16th, and so I'm turning into an old man. Every year just gets a little bit older, and so it was a good birthday. It was really good. Well,
half of it.
half of it was
half
good.
Of it was
good. Every year we make it a tradition. I've always loved going to the zoo, and so even before we had kids, me and Cammy always went to the zoo on my birthday. I always take off work that day, and so we woke up early and took the kids to the zoo as soon as they opened. And we spent about 3 hours there with our father-in-law, or my father-in-law, Cammy's dad.
My dad.
And had a really good time. And luckily it wasn't too hot that day. It wasn't too brutal. And so we went to the zoo, and then after that we went to Chick-fil-A. If you know me, you know I love my Chick-fil-A. I'm like a platinum member on the reward app, and so I take pride in my Chick-fil-A fandom. And so we went to Chick-fil-A, and then after Chick-fil-A we put the kids down for a nap. And I'll let Cammy tell a little bit about this side of the story.
So that's where things kind of took a turn. So we had a really good morning. We had a great time at the zoo. So actually, backtrack a little bit to last week. Unfortunately, our son, Bridger, he ended up getting COVID. And then Caleb and I ended up getting it as well. And so it was just a fun time. So that's why, like, when I say we were sick last week, that's like, and why we're still like, Caleb's over it for sure. Yeah. I'm mostly over it, but on Wednesday,
we thought we were past it.
Yes, we definitely thought we were past it. I am pretty sure I've just had like, I don't know, like a sinus infection or something after getting COVID and all of that. But I didn't know if it was like still trying to get over COVID or what it was. But anyway, so Wednesday I was feeling great. Monday and Tuesday felt good. Went on walks, took the kids out, like had good days. I was feeling better. Like, you know, energy was a little bit better, all of that stuff. And then Wednesday morning got up, worked out, got ready. We went to the zoo, walked around for about 3 hours. And then by the time we got home and got lunch, I was just feeling so tired and exhausted, and not like a mom tired, I've been with the kids all morning type of tired, like so exhausted, tired, I could barely move. And I just did not feel good at all. And I kind of feel like I just got hit by a bus. Like, that's the best way to describe it. And I was like, I got up early, so maybe I just need to take a nap and I'll feel better. And we were supposed to go to a baseball game that night for Caleb's birthday. My mother-in-law was going to come over and watch the kids. We were going to go to the baseball game. Like, it was going to be a nice night out. It wasn't going to be too hot, so we were looking forward to it because it's been real hot lately here in Kansas. So anyway, I laid down after we put the kids down for a nap and took a nap, slept for about an hour or so, and then when I woke up, I was so hot. I was running a fever. I felt even worse than I did before I went to sleep, and I just felt so bad. And I also felt so bad because I knew that meant that we were not going to go anywhere that night, because there was no way I was going to be able to make it to a baseball game to sit for 3 hours in the sun.
To tell you how bad she was, I got a birthday reward from Crumble Cookie. So before we went to Crumble Cookie to go pick it up, we were going to go stop by Target to go pick up a couple things. And Cammy comes into Target, and she's like shivering like it's negative 10 degrees outside.
It literally felt so cold. It felt like I was walking into a freezer. It literally.
And I was like, it's like 90 degrees, Cammy. It is not cold. She's like, no, it's freezing cold. And I was like, it is not. And so clearly wasn't feeling good. Clearly had a fever. We don't think it was the same sickness as last week. We think it was just something that hit after, or a recovery thing. But yeah, so we didn't go to the baseball game that night, but it turned out to still be a good night. Cammy napped quite a bit, and I brought the kids downstairs. We started a weekly movie night with Renly. and we're taking her through the Toy Stories.
She's loving it.
She's loving it. Every day she asks if we can have a movie night with popcorn.
Popcorn. I think that's why. She just wants the popcorn.
Yeah, she can eat a whole bowl of popcorn by herself if you let her. And so we watched Toy Story 3. I cried like I always do.
Caleb's a real softie. That's something you'll learn about him is he acts all tough and stuff like that, but if it comes to movies that
nostalgia.
are like, yes, nostalgic or goodbyes,
yep.
He is not good with goodbyes. He will be the first one crying.
And so we watched Toy Story, and it was a good night. Cammy thought she ruined my birthday, but she didn't.
I did. I felt so bad.
And so, but luckily last night we got to make it up. We were supposed to go to a concert. I won't go into too much detail on that, but concert wound up getting canceled. And so since that got canceled, we already had a babysitter lined up. And so I was like, why don't we go to the baseball game tonight? Because our local minor league team was still in town, and they were still playing the team I wanted to see. And so we went last night. It was hot, but it was a fun and good game. And so there was a fireworks show after. And so we were up till midnight, I think, this last night, which is me and Cam were talking. We don't know the last time we stayed up past midnight.
That wasn't with a crying baby.
Yeah, that wasn't. Yeah, just midnight on our own. And so it was a late night. But that was a little bit about our week. And so
and I'm feeling much better. Thursday it was a little rough again. Yeah. Still wasn't. My fever finally, like I had a fever from probably 2 or 3 p.m. until about 8 p.m. on Wednesday. It did not go down like at all until that night. So Thursday was still a little rough, unfortunately, and I was moving a little slow, but Ren and I made it out to story time. We have this tradition every week of going to a local coffee shop around us that has a story time, and it is a big hit with the kids. Like there is probably 20 to 30 2 and 3-year-olds and babies there, like for the story time. It is a big hit, and the lady who does it, she is like the best at stories with kids, and she's an older lady, and she's just so sweet, and all the kids love her, and Rin absolutely adores her and adores story time. So I still promised her that we would go, so we made it out. I made it barely, but I made it. And today I'm feeling so much better, way more energy. Worked out yesterday. I gave myself a rest day Thursday, which if you know me in fitness, that does not happen like hardly at all. Never. I do believe in rest days.
I have to tell Cammy to not wake up some days and wake up early. Like don't set your alarm because you need to sleep. But she doesn't like to listen to her body sometimes.
I am the type, I will push myself to the limits, and sometimes
she doesn't
it's just
listen to her
too
body.
Much.
And so I told her to rest, and she did actually rest for 2 days this week. So I was proud of her for actually listening to her body. But yeah, and so we're both on the pretty much recovered swing now, and so we're feeling much better. And so we're excited to record this podcast. And this podcast is going to be a lot deeper than the intro. The intro, we just kind of kept it pretty surface level just to kind of do an introduction to ourselves. But this episode, we're going to dive into our relationship a little bit, kind of our relationship journey, you could say. We're going to talk about how we met, kind of our progression from dating, and how we kind of get to our marriage point. And so I guess we'll start by talking how we met. So we met many years ago. We've almost known each other our whole lives for the most part. Yes. We met when Cammy was 4 and I was probably 7. And we were going to a church here in Wichita. Both of our families met at that church. My parents are pastors. They were the associate pastors at this church. So, and so we met the Ward family at the time through that church. And over time, just some drama happened at the church. I won't go into it. But my family decided, hey, it was time to break off and start our own church.
And your parents are pastors.
Yeah, my parents are pastors. And so due to the drama in that church, we just decided, hey, we're going to break off and start our own church. And Cammy's family decided to follow my parents, and they kind of started the church together. Like they were kind of one of our first families that came over with us. And so met in church, grew up in church together our whole lives. I mean, from the time, like I said, she was 3, I was probably 6 or 7 or 4. Yeah. And I was 6 or 7. And shortly after we started our own church, her brother became my best friend. Cammy's brother, John. John and I have always been attached at the hip since we were kids. Like we played, I spent the night at their house all the time. I went on vacations with them.
Come to my grandparents' farm with us.
Yeah, I went to the farm all the time. Like our families were literally like inseparable. Like we were always together, always doing stuff. And so as we grew up over, I don't know, 10, 12 years later, I never was romantically interested in Cammy just because there is an age difference. There's a 3.5 year age gap between Cammy and I. So when you're young, 3.5 years is a really big deal.
It wasn't for me though.
It wasn't for Cammy. I'll let Cammy talk about this one.
Yes. So I don't know why, but I always knew that I would marry Caleb. I used to keep journals and diaries growing up, and when I was 7, I know I was 7 because I dated it. So when I was 7, I wrote in my diary that I would marry Caleb one day. I don't know why. I do not remember writing that, but for some reason, apparently God told me that I was going to marry him. So I wrote that when I was 7, and I always had a crush on him. And so I was always the little sister that was always tagging along or listening. I always had to listen to all of his girl drama when he was in high school and he was talking to girls and getting rejected by them.
Well, let's just say my nickname should have been Friend Zone Caleb in high school. I had a lot of crushes on different women, and none of them panned out to be very successful.
That he did. And so, I got to hear all about them on the car rides, anytime he was at our house, while he was on the phone talking to them and flirting with them. And yeah, it was a fun time.
I tried to play the game, but I got shut down a lot. And so, well, it didn't help that I looked like Harry Potter back in the day. And so I had the little round glasses, and I was a nerdy little kid.
Oversized T-shirts that didn't fit you.
I wore size larges when I was should have been wearing a small at the time.
Extra small.
Yeah, I wasn't ever a good fashion person. Still not today, but it's come a better way. But so I grew up with their family. Cammy was never really on my radar. I was apparently on her since she was 7. And so always, like I said, been really close with her brother John. And so it was about Cammy was 14, 15-ish. And I had been rejected by many women. Not rejected per se. No, I was just friend zoned like a lot of time. Yeah. I don't like to use that term friend zone, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
And so I was friend zoned a lot. And so just never had success in the relationship side. And Cammy started to blossom as a teenager. And so I'll never forget this. We were at my sister's wedding, and I've always had a celebrity crush on Taylor Swift, always have. And so we were at that wedding, and my uncle was there. My uncle, we'll probably talk about him a lot on this podcast, but he's probably one of my biggest role models in life. And he was at the wedding, and he was like, "Hey, Caleb, that girl over there kind of looks like Taylor Swift, and I think she really likes you, and I think you should go pursue her." And like I said, Cammy started to blossom into a teenager, and went from, instead of being a girl who was 3.5 years younger than me, she started turning into a woman, and started catching my attention. And so that night at that wedding is when we first started, you could say, talking, and not as her being John's little sister anymore, but as something more than that. But Cammy's parents had rules that she couldn't date till she was 16. And she was probably late 14, early 15 around this time. So we still had about a year before she could date. And keep in mind, it's gonna make me sound creepy, I was like 17 at the time. And so there was an age gap. And so,
but you never looked at, and you definitely did not act like it.
No, I definitely didn't act like it at the time. So I was 17, she was 14. We had to wait till she turned 16 to date. So we called it being put on, Cammy was on layaway, is what we called it. One of my best friends always said that we were on layaway. And so I did wait for her to turn 16, or just shy of it. It was 1 week shy.
2 weeks.
2 weeks shy. And there was a concert in town. That shows you how romantic I was. But we went to Applebee's, the most romantic place in the world, before this concert. And I actually, due to the fact that it was 2 weeks before she turned 16, I had to get her parents' permission to date, because they knew we were going to date. We were talking for a year.
So in between that time, before we went on that date, though, what we would do is we would go out with a group of us would go
Yeah.
out, like with my brothers and with some of our other
Whatever girls they
friends.
were interested in.
Yeah, yes.
So,
And we would all hang out together,
yeah.
and Caleb and I would talk then in the group. And then also, Facebook
Oh,
Messenger
yeah.
was a big thing back then. And
Yep.
so we would talk on Facebook Messenger. This would have been in 2010
Yep.
because it was the year before we started dating. So this was
It
2010.
was the year after I graduated high school.
Yeah. And so we would always talk on there, usually at night and stuff like that. And so that's really kind of how we started growing our
Mhm.
friendship
Yeah.
way before we even started dating, was talking on there pretty much every single day,
Yep.
as much as we could anytime in our free time.
Yeah. And my first move before we could actually date, well, one of my first moves was I used to go to concerts all the time. Like I would go to a concert almost weekly, and I knew Cammy liked certain artists. And I bragged one time. This is when you were still 15. I'm pretty sure I got the timeline right, but it was a Rascal Flatts concert, and I was like, "Oh, someone's calling me. Hold on."
Hold on.
And so it was a Rascal Flatts concert, and I messaged Cam. I was like, "You're not gonna believe it. I got Rascal Flatts tickets." And she was like, "Oh man, I'm so jealous. I wish I could go see Rascal Flatts." And I was like, I thought I was smooth. I was like, "Well, good thing I got you a ticket." Like, and so we went to Rascal Flatts together. And then it was a few months later. Cam got closer to 16. And like I said, this is where the Applebee's story comes in. My family used to go to Applebee's all the time. That's like where it was an every Wednesday night occurrence. It's where my family did baby announcements. We announced big things, like, because we always were at Applebee's every single Wednesday night. And so for some reason, I thought it would be romantic to take Cammy to Applebee's, the most romantic place in the world. And that's where I asked her to be my girlfriend at the time. Of course, she had been waiting. I mean, we both knew we were going to date for a year prior.
That's where it was official.
Yeah, but that's when it turned official, was an booth at Applebee's. And then afterwards, we went to an Easton Corbin concert. And we started our dating experience then. But what's funny about that whole thing is I remember me and Cammy were talking for so long. Like I said, we started talking when she was 14, just about to turn 15.
Yeah, it was almost 15.
We kind of kept it hush hush because obviously she couldn't date for another year. So we kind of kept it between us that we were talking. And it was like, because keep in mind, John, her brother, is my best friend. So a lot of people say I broke bro code and married my best friend's little sister. And John, it was like a year into us talking. It was maybe not a year, six or 7 months into us talking. We were talking a lot. Like, we were hanging out a lot. Like, me and Cam were talking a lot. And John finally messaged me out of the blue and was like, "Caleb, do you like my sister?" And I'm like, "Dude, we've been talking for like 6 months." And
he was like the last to recognize
it. And I was like, everybody like in the world knew that we were talking. Like, but for some reason, he didn't pick up on it. And
gotta love him.
And you gotta love him. And so, but he was like, and I was like, "Yeah, we've been talking for like 6 months, dude." And he was like, "Okay, cool." Like, and that was kind of the end of the conversation. So some people, when I tell them that story that I married my best friend's little sister, they're like, "So are you still friends with him?" I'm like, "Yeah, like we're cool." Like, and so yeah, that's a little bit of story about kind of our how we met and our pre-steps into dating. And then I guess we can get into the first kiss story.
No, yeah, that was a fun time.
That's a fun time. And so I'll lead this one since I had the plan. And I'll let Cammy give her side of it.
Yeah.
And so first kiss, I had great plans. My uncle, who is the one that told me to take an interest in Cammy, he used to live in New Jersey, right outside New York City. And Cam and I always wanted to go to New York City. Like, that was always kind of a dream of both of ours to go. And so we convinced her parents to let her come with me and my parents to go with us to New York. They only allowed it because my parents were there. And so we went to New York. You were 16 at the time. It was right when we started dating. I was like, I got to plan this first kiss. And I had this great plan. And I was like, we're going to go on the Empire State Building. We're going to get to the top of the Empire State Building. Like, I'm going to make this really romantic thing. And our first kiss is going to be in New York City on the top of the Empire State Building. And I honestly don't remember what happened to that trip.
I can't remember either.
But something happened where it had to get delayed.
Yeah.
And we still wound up going to New York later, but it was like 6 or 7 months later. And as a man, I couldn't wait 6 or 7 more months. And so I was like, I got to come up with another plan. And so Cammy never got to go to a homecoming or a prom because Cammy grew up homeschooled. I grew up public school. And at this time I was graduated from high school. And so I had already gone to 5 or 6 homecomings, and I've been to a couple proms. And so I got that experience. Cammy never got that experience, but she was in high school.
Mhm. Well,
Um,
this was my senior year
yeah.
because since I was homeschooled, I was able to graduate a year early and did so. And so I was 16, and this was my senior. It would have been senior year.
Correct. And so it was Cammy's senior year, and she really wanted to go to like a homecoming or prom kind of thing to get that experience.
Yeah.
And Wichita has come a long way in the homeschool market now, but back then it wasn't as phenomenal.
No.
And so we found this thing, or Cammy found this. I don't even know how we found it, but
It was just in the homeschool organization.
yeah, there's a thing called homeschool prom.
Yeah.
And we went. We decided to go to give Cammy the experience of a prom. We got all dressed up. I was in a nice outfit. Cammy was in a green dress, and we got all dolled up, and we went to this homeschool prom, and it was the most awkward night of my life. Like, I'm not trying to sound mean. Like, no offense to any homeschoolers listening, but it was your typical homeschoolers.
It was just not...
I wouldn't say typical. Your stereotypical.
Yes, stereotypical.
Homeschoolers. And it was awkward. It was like men on one side of the room, girls on the other side, like just staring awkwardly at each other. They didn't play any secular music. It was dancing to Christian music, and like
it was not what we thought it was going to be.
They wouldn't even let you like slow dance. You literally had to like put your arms straight out and like dance that way if you wanted to dance, and you had to leave room for the Holy Spirit, I guess. And then slow dancing to Christian music just.
You just can't
really
weird. Do that.
And so, and it was really awkward. Me and Cammy didn't honestly know anybody really at this homeschool prom. Like, and so we only stayed for like maybe an hour.
Yeah.
And we were all like, let's get out of here. Like, this is the dumbest thing we ever.
No, it wasn't the dumbest thing. It just was not. It just did not hold up to our expectations.
Unfulfilled expectations.
Yes.
Yeah. And so,
so we went downtown. Do you remember that?
Yeah, so we went downtown. Yeah. Yep, and we walked because we have Wichita is not a fantastic place to do, but our river walk is really cool. Yeah. We have the Arkansas River runs right through Wichita, and we have this thing called the Keep of the Plains, and you can walk along the river, and they have it lit up real nice. So we did have a romantic walk,
that's nice.
kind of down by the river because the homeschool prom was right down in that area, and so. I went down for a walk, and I don't know why I didn't choose to kiss you there because that would have been more romantic than what I did. But anyways, we went up for a walk and we talked, and then it was getting late, and Cammy always had very strict curfews. We'll get into that more probably here in a minute. But Cammy always had really strict curfews with her parents, and so we knew we had to start calling it a night soon, and we had carpooled to the prom together, and Cammy's car was parked at her mom's hair salon.
Yes.
And the hair salon, it's not in the ghetto, but it's not in the
best part of town.
Not in the best part of town. Yeah, it's kind of a sketchy area. So I had to take Cammy back to her car so she could drive back home. And I was borrowing my dad's car that night. I don't even know why I had my dad's car.
This was nicer than your car.
Yeah, I think it was because I was driving this really beat up Ford Taurus, like a 1988 Ford Taurus that.
Your door wouldn't open.
I'll go into stories on that another time. I could talk about that car for days. It was the most rigged car I've ever had. But so I borrowed my dad's car, and so we're sitting in this hair salon parking lot in kind of the ghetto. And for some reason, I thought that was the most romantic spot to have a first kiss. So my first kiss expectations went from the top of the Empire State Building to being in a hair salon in a not nice neighborhood in my dad's car. And that's where we had our first kiss.
Yeah,
so
it was. It was indeed. But I will say you were very, very much a gentleman. You did ask if you could kiss me before you did. And it was very nice. It was sweet and nice and not New York, but it was still nice and it was good.
It was the thought that counted about me wanting to do it in New York. But it didn't.
And we did get that then, like 6 months later.
So we did get to eventually go to New York. We actually went to New York twice.
Not in that year.
Not in that year, but within our dating relationship, we went to New York twice. And still love New York. And it's a fun place to visit. And so did eventually kiss on the top of the Empire State Building. But it wasn't our first kiss. No. And so that's a little bit about our first kiss. And so Cammy and I, we never really had that much drama in our dating relationship.
I think it's just because we knew we were going to get married. Like, I don't know. Like, I think because we set that groundwork for that whole year before we could even date, of becoming friends. So that is when we just use that time to talk, to get to know each other, to talk about our passions, talk about the future, what we saw for each other for the future, what we wanted out of life, like our dreams, like all that kind of stuff. We became really best friends before we even started dating.
Yeah, and there wasn't honestly a whole lot of drama, and I think it's because, like Cami said, I mean, if you're willing to wait for someone for a year just to date, like it set a lot of groundwork, and we knew what we wanted. And the other thing is, like I said, we grew up since Cami was 4 and I was 7, and so there was no skeletons in the closet. Like I said, I grew up with her family very close. I was at her house at least once or twice a week, growing up, and so there was no skeletons in the closet. She knew about all the girls I had crushes on. She knew all the stuff that I went through in school, and I knew her stuff because like we grew up in youth groups together, and so there was just nothing to hide, and so we really didn't have that much drama. And then we started dating in 2011, and then it got to late 2013, I think it was. So this was 2 years into our dating relationship, and we both knew that marriage is where we were headed. At the time, I've never been, I'll say, like a lazy worker. I've always had a lot of, I've always been one to work. I've had a job since I was 13 years old. And at this time in Cam and I's relationship, I was actually working 3 jobs at the time. I was working for the minor league baseball team in town. I worked for them for 8 seasons. And then I was working at a music and video game store for 5 years. And I was working at our local mall for 5 years. And I was doing all these jobs at the exact same time. So it was never necessarily a laziness thing. I've always been a workaholic when it comes to showing up to work and getting paid and stuff like that. But I will say I didn't know how to budget wisely. I was very reckless with money. Like I said, I was going to concerts every week. Even if I didn't even like the band, I would just go to the concert. And I spent all my money on food because when I was working 3 jobs, I was going out to eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so every single week, I was getting my bank account down to like $2 or $3 left in it. And so, and Cammie's, we talked in the last episode, Cammie's the opposite of me. She's always been a saver. Anytime she gets money, she puts it in the bank, and that was kind of her mindset. And so we're a little bit opposite. So we were getting to the point of wanting to get married. And I'll let Cammie kind of tell this story since this is more her thing.
So it would have been 2013, and I was 18. I had been graduated for about 2 years at the time and was just working full time. And like Caleb said, he was working 3 part-time jobs, and you would think that would be like he's making good money and all this and blah, blah, blah. But he, like he said, he was spending it. He was not saving anything. He was living in his parents' basement, which there's nothing wrong with that. And then he also
borrowing my mom's car.
Yes, he also was borrowing his mom's car because at the time he did not have a car because the previous one broke down, and he had not been
nothing in savings to go buy a car.
No, and you hadn't even been looking for one for like the last 6 months. Like he'd been using just his mom's car. And so for me, I had these dreams and these goals and this vision of what I wanted for my future. And I thought what he wanted too, but it wasn't seeming like it was meshing. And to me, I didn't know I didn't know where it was going. Like, I thought we were on the same page. I thought we both had aligned goals and what we wanted for the future and with each other. But I wasn't going to sit around and wait for another 3-4 years for him to get his life together and get everything figured out.
Trying to be nice, get my crap together. Is what
yes, basically. I mean, he was 21, living in his parents' basement, had no money to his name, had no car. And I was just like, this is not what I want for my future.
Well, and Cammie always knew she wanted to get married young. Like, she always knew that. And so she was getting to that age where, I mean, at this point you were...
I was 18.
Yeah, she was 18, so she was ready.
Yeah. And so, so like Caleb mentioned, his uncle, I say our uncle because he's mine now too, and we look up to him so much. But he told me when I first started dating that if I ever needed anything to help Caleb to get him in line, or kind of like just being that uncle that that every guy needs in their life, that I could reach out to him and he'd always be there for me. So I, as my last resort, I did wind up contacting him and basically just told him everything and just told him how I was pretty much ready for marriage. I was ready to get married. I thought Caleb was too, but this is kind of where we were. We were kind of at a crossroads, and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know what was going to help him and what I needed to do. And so he basically told me I just kind of needed to sit him down and give him a talk and just tell him everything that I told his uncle, and just lay it all out there for him. And so that was a conversation that was definitely something I was not looking forward to. That was probably the hardest conversation I've ever had to have.
So it was going to be a make or break conversation.
Yeah,
like, it was either we break up that point or I get my crap together and
literally. And so I put it off and put it off and put it off the whole day. It came to this one day, and we were hanging out, and we had a certain time limit because we were going to hang out with his family later that night, and they were coming over at a certain time. So I literally had like maybe an hour left before his family was coming over. We were hanging out, and I was like, I have to talk to him today because I don't know if I forget if we were like going on a trip with my family or something. I forget, in a few days or something. I don't know. But anyway, so it was that day, and we were hanging out. And he could tell something was off. Like, I was being quiet. I wasn't really talking much. He was like, what is going on? And so finally, I was like, we need to talk. And so we sat down, and I did. I just basically laid it all out there, and I said, look, this is my dreams. This is what I want for the future. This is what I see. This is what I know I see in you. This is what I see for our future. I love you. Like, I want to marry you, but I can't do this. I need you to step up. I need you to get an apartment. I need you to show me that you can get a full-time job, that you can get a car, that you can be the man that I know you can be. Like, I need you to show me that and to prove that to me, because I don't want us starting out our future like this. And I knew if we were to get married right then and there with the circumstances that it would be a very rough go, like from the beginning. And I didn't want that. I wanted to set us up for success. And so in order to do that, I knew he needed to get his stuff in order. I had some money in my savings. I had a good full-time job at the time. Like, I had a reliable car, and I was like, I need you to match that. And I know that once you do that, we'll be good. And like, it was not a lot that I had in my savings at all, but it was something. And I knew once he could get himself together, get his things figured out that he needed to, that we would be okay, and we could do it from there. So that would have been early fall, I think, like late summer, early fall.
I think it was probably September, October.
No, I don't think it was that late. I think it was like August or September. Yeah.
Yeah. But it wasn't too long. And then crazy about that. So we had that sit down conversation where Cammy basically said, either get your crap together or we're done. Like, and so I decided to take the path of getting my crap together. And then it was crazy because I remember we were at church. It was like a small group, or I don't remember, maybe it was youth group or something like that. And I opened up and I was like, 2013 has been the worst year of my life. Like, I just didn't have nothing went my way. Like, I didn't have money. Like, I was in a rut. And so I was like, I'm going to turn this over to God. Like, it's time for me to quit trying to do it under Caleb's power and let God do it under his power. And so I remember saying in youth group, I was like, 2013 sucked. This was later in the year. I was like, 2013 sucked. I'm giving my 2014 to God, and I'm going to just lay it at his feet, and whatever he can do with it, Caleb's done trying. And then it was really crazy because it, like, as soon as I said I'm going to let go and I'm going to let God take care of it, like, everything clicked like at once. Like, I got a vehicle, and then
job opportunity,
and then because one of Cammy's ultimatums was basically like, look, you got to get a big boy job, like the baseball stadium thing, the video game store. It's not working anymore. You got to get a big boy job if we're going to get married. And so the job actually that I'm still with today, 10 years later, it lined up where I got to start that in January of 2014. So, and then also at the beginning of January 14, an apartment lined up for me to get out of my parents. Like, everything, it was like within like a 2-week span. I got it was like a full-time job, an apartment, a car, and like everything like just clicked. And so, I mean, that preaches in itself when you let go of yourself trying to do it, let go of your pride and trying to do things under your own power, and you just say, hey, you know what, God, I'm going to lay it at your feet, and I'm going to let you take the reins. It's amazing how fast God can move. And I think sometimes God's just waiting for us to drop the reins. God is a gentleman, and he's not going to ever force his hand. And I think he was waiting for me to drop the reins. And then sure enough, like I said, everything went into place. I got a full-time job. I got the apartment. So I moved out for the first time on my own. Got a car and started just kind of building my life from scratch in 2014. And it was amazing how fast God moved. And so I got my crap together really fast in January. Everything that Cami wanted me, like basically her ultimatum of get a car, get a place to live, get a full-time job, like happened back to back to back. So I was like, all right, well, if that happened back to back to back, I'm going to propose. And so I had the ring for
like 6 months,
7 months. I bought it.
Yeah.
Even though I didn't have money, I did save money for that. And so I had the ring for 6 or 7 months. I just wanted to have it because I knew we were headed towards that path. And so finally in January, like I said, everything lined up. And I was in my training class at work, and I actually had the ring in my pocket, and I was going to propose that night. So I guess we'll go a little bit into the proposal story. I actually didn't have this in my notes. But the proposal, the way that worked, is one of my best friends. He is very good with technology and with lighting and all this stuff. And so I told Cami a little white lie, and I told her that we were going to go bowling with a friend of mine from high school that was in town from New York City. Mm-hmm. And I said we were going to meet him to go bowling. I don't even think he was in town. I think I just
he was.
Was he? Yeah. Okay. I didn't know if I made that up or not. And so I told him he was in town. We're going to meet him to go bowling, which is funny because I've never even went bowling with this guy in my life. So I don't even know where that came from.
Yeah.
But I told her on our way to the supposed bowling alley that I had left my phone charger at our church. And
which is a very Caleb thing to do. Like back when we were dating, he would do that all the time because him and his buddy would always hang out at the church and fix things, work on things, like that kind of stuff. And so he was always there, and he was always forgetting things. And so I was just like, okay, like, he forgot his cord. Of course he did.
Mm-hmm. And so basically, I told her we were going to go to the church. So I went to the church, and my buddy Jason had everything set up for me. He had like white lights going through the middle of the sanctuary. All the chairs were spread out, so it was an empty sanctuary. And prior to this, for the month prior to me proposing, I had reached out to a bunch of people from Cami's past. Some of them were her high school cheerleader friends, family, friends that we had that were mutual friends. My parents. I don't know if your parents were.
Yeah.
Were they?
Well, my brothers were.
Yeah, I think her brothers were in it. But I got a video basically of all of my friends giving relationship advice and then basically telling Cami to say yes. And so I got her into the sanctuary.
Well, preface. So as we were walking up to the door and Caleb was unlocking the church door, I remember I looked to my side because if I looked to my left, there was a street by our church, and there's houses over there, and a lot of cars would park there by the houses and stuff. So we were walking up, he's unlocking the door, and I remember glancing, and I remember the thought crossed my mind. I was like, that looks like my mom's car. And I think it was like his sister's car or something. I was like, that really looks like their cars. And as soon as I thought that, I was like, oh my goodness, I know what's happening.
Yep. And so we walked into the church, and I actually kicked the sanctuary door to signal my buddy Jason to get everything rolling. And opened the door. The lights were there. Video played with all of my friends and family saying, say yes. And then I got down on a knee and proposed, and Cami said yes. And we have a balcony at our old church, we had a balcony, and all of our friends and family were up in the balcony. And as soon as she said yes, she didn't know all of them were up there.
No.
But there was a loud cheer. And it's pretty cool. And we had a little after party, and it was a really good time.
Yeah,
and so I actually skipped
a good night.
It was a very good night, but I actually skipped one thing in the walk to this journey to engagement, and that was asking for Cami's hand in marriage.
Oh yeah, what a fun
time.
We
have to talk about this story. This is probably my favorite stories to tell because it's so funny. So Cami and I knew we were going to get married, and honestly, me asking for her hand in marriage, I just did it out of respect to her dad, out of respect to her mom, and but even if they would have said no, we were still going to get married one way or the other.
Yeah.
I was just doing it as a respect thing. So I remember, so leading up to this, keep in mind, like I said, I was working 3 part-time jobs, didn't have a car, was living in my parents' basement for a long time, and so her dad. What's really funny with Cami's dad is growing up. Like I said, I grew up going to their house every single week, multiple times a week for 20 years of my life, or not that long at that point. It was
No, like 15.
but 15 years of my life. And me and her dad have always had always had a really good relationship. He always liked me,
Mm-hmm.
and never had any sort of beef with me at all until I started talking to his only daughter, romantically. And when that started talking, his personality towards me changed quite dramatically. And so our whole dating period, my relationship with her dad really got weird. Like there was always a weird tension. Like he would always joke around with me. Like we would play sports with her brothers. But then once we started dating, like he got very distant from me.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I wasn't lazy or anything like that. I just didn't know how to organize my life very well. And her dad saw that. And so I somewhat understand where he was coming from in the situation. So it gets to the point where I want to ask for Cammie's hand in marriage. And so Cammie, I think, was at work.
Mm-hmm.
I think you were working at a clothing store, a baby's clothes store at the time. And basically, I was like, Cammie's at work. I'm going to go out to her parents' house. So I send them a text. I was like, hey, this is to Cammie's parents. I said, I really want to talk to you guys tonight if you guys have a minute. And so I was like, I'm going to come out to your guys' town. They live in a little town outside of our city. And I want to talk to you guys tonight. And they're like, okay, that's fine. And so I go out there that night. And it's awkward because I think we all knew what conversation was coming. And so eventually I worked up the guts. Like I think we ate dinner maybe out there. I was hanging out with her brothers. And all of a sudden I was like, hey, Cammie's parents, I would like to go talk with you guys if we could. So we went down. Well, first off, her brothers were there, her brothers, John and Josh. And I was just going to have this conversation with her dad. And I've always been really close to her mom, so I wanted her mom in the conversation too. And so I was like, I want to talk to you guys. And so for some reason, Cammie's mom was like, John and Josh, why don't you guys come down and have a conversation with us? And I was like,
just a whole family
so
event.
It was a whole family event minus Cammie. And I have no idea why John and Josh were invited into the conversation because I thought we all knew what the conversation was going to be, which I just wanted to be her parents. But she's like, come on, John and Josh, let's go all have this conversation with Caleb. And I was like, oh, Lord.
My mom was always the type, she didn't want to leave anybody out. So she was always telling everyone that they could join in when it was not something that they should have been joining, no matter what it was.
Yeah, and so it was really awkward. So we go downstairs to her dad's office, and I give my little 2-minute spiel about, hey, I've been in a relationship with your daughter for 2-3 years now. You've known what my intentions are. I went into that whole fancy spiel, and all her dad told me was, so I said, well, first I said, can I have your daughter's hand in marriage? And all he did was look at me for about 5 seconds and go, what do you want me to say? That was it. That's all he told me was, what do you want me to say? And so there was this awkward pause because I just wanted a yes. That's all I really cared about. And all he said was, what do you want me to say? And so we just kind of stared awkwardly at each other for a few seconds. And then luckily, Cammie's mom cut the tension and was like, yes, I say yes. And then she's like, we got to pray together. We got to get excited. And so Cammie's mom said yes. But believe it or not, Cammie's dad never told me
said yes.
I could marry his daughter. And so it was a really awkward conversation. And so her dad, her mom, her brothers, I think your mom just prayed. I don't think your dad was in the mood to pray at that time.
I'm sure not. Sure not.
And so her mom prayed over me and Cammie's relationship, and this was all in January. And so it was a weird path with her dad for a little bit, but trust me, it didn't stay that way. Once it got to the wedding day, and it got to the actual day, her dad did pull me aside by myself and said, hey, I'm really excited to have you as part of the family. I'm happy to call you a son. And then to this day, me and her dad have a fantastic relationship. Mm-hmm. And so we joke around with each other all the time. Like, now that I have a daughter, he always asks, like, do you understand why I was the way that I was? And I'm like, yes and no. Like, I get why you're protective of your daughter.
Still a little harsh.
But at the same time, I'm not saying this to toot my own horn, but I was a really good guy for your daughter. Like, I never disrespected her, never abused her. Another fun fact that we'll get into for a few minutes is Cam and I did wait for marriage before any.
Wait, as in what?
the bounce wow wow.
Okay, you don't have to put it like that.
I'm keeping it PG here.
Okay.
And so
say marital relations.
That's boring. And so
Okay.
so we did wait for marriage,
Yes.
and so that's why I was always confused with why her dad didn't like me. I was like, we
didn't live together.
We didn't live together. We didn't do anything.
We weren't out doing drugs or drinking.
We didn't do anything physically. And so I was always very respectful of Kim. I was always respectful of her parents' boundaries that they had for us, and so that was the 50-50 thing. I get that he was protective of his daughter, but I didn't get why he treated me so hard when I honestly treated his daughter pretty well, minus like my money situation. And so so that was a little bit into that. And so
also with that, like we got engaged in January, and then I always wanted a spring wedding because summers here in Kansas get really, really hot, and so I definitely did not want to do a summer wedding with taking pictures outside and all of that. So I wanted to do a spring wedding, which by the time it got to January, I was like, okay, he's for sure not proposing this year, and I'm not going to get married this year because it's already January. We have like 2 or 3 months if he were to propose to plan something that's crazy. Like, so I was full on thinking like, okay, it's probably going to be next year by the time we actually finally get married and all of that stuff. Well, anyway, finally did propose in January, which like January 10th. And so then when he did, I was like, okay, well, it's still early enough. Maybe we could still have a spring wedding this year. So we got engaged January. We got married May 30th of that year. So 4.5 months later, we planned a wedding for about 180 people we had at the wedding.
We had a big wedding.
Planned it all. My family all got together, made the food all for it for the reception, got a cake, got the dress, got decorations. We all decorated it. Like the guys decorated it while we were getting ready for the day. Like we did everything under budget too, like budget friendly. It was a lot, but we made it all happen in 4.5 months.
Yeah, so there was a lot of reasons, kind of why we had a short engagement. Because, like I said, we got engaged in the middle.
I think everybody knows if we waited for marriage, why it was a short.
But when you grow up in a very Christian household and physical intimacy was not a thing in our dating relationship, most young Christian couples have short engagements for a specific reason. I'll let your mind figure it out. So we had a short engagement because Cammy wanted a spring wedding. I was ready for that, and there was just things like I said, Cammy always knew
ready.
Cammy just knew she wanted to get married young. She was ready to move out of the house like with her family, and not that she had a bad life at home or anything like that, but she was ready to start
be on my own.
Be on her own, and her brothers were dating at the time, and she was ready to kind of get her wings and fly. So we just knew we wanted a really short engagement, and so people thought we were crazy for having an almost 200-person wedding, and I mean we planned it in 3 or 4 months, and but everything came together really smooth. And honestly, it was a really perfect wedding day. Like a lot of people say, your wedding day flies by and you don't remember it, but honestly, I can remember almost every detail, even 9.5 years later almost. And I can remember it vividly. Like, and it was a beautiful wedding. It was really fun. Our family, friends, and loved ones were there, and so that's kind of our story from I guess you could say how we met all the way to marriage. And so it's been a great. Well, I guess we started really talking in 2010-ish.
Late. Yeah, it would have been late 2009, early 2010.
Yeah, and so I mean, we've been talking for many, many years now, and I've been married for over 9 years, and so it's just funny to kind of look back and see the journey. And so I guess we'll start to wrap up because we're coming up on some time here. But I guess if you had to say, what would be, if you have people that are listening who are either in a relationship that want to pursue marriage, or if they are, I guess we'll just say, what would be your relationship advice to people?
You asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you. What would be, if you could give a piece of advice to a young couple or somebody wanting to pursue a relationship, what would your advice be?
Somebody like a single person wanting
what
to
would be
pursue,
your best piece? I mean, it doesn't have to be. It could just be your best piece of relationship advice. Like, if you had to give a key piece of advice just to a couple, like, what would you say would be your piece of advice?
Gosh, that's a hard one because it could go in so many directions. Like, and it like there's so many different aspects to a relationship, to marriage. Oh my goodness. I guess just like to make sure that they are grounded in their faith and like grounded in, like, obviously we're Christians, so we're believers. Like, we believe God is the most important thing in our marriage and in our relationship. And without that, I feel like it's very hard in a relationship because you have so many disagreements, like, and not just like, I know a lot of couples that aren't Christians that don't have a ton of disagreements. That's not what I'm saying. But like, I just feel like when you have God as your center, it's just like there's a peace that comes with it. Like, you're both at peace. Like, the conversations just flow. You don't have to, it's not that you don't have to try, because obviously marriage is work and relationship takes work, and you can't, they'd be lying if we said we never had disagreements or arguments or stuff like that. But it's just so much easier in a sense. And so I guess I would say to just make sure that, like, yeah, you talk about that and talk about the hard things. Like, I know I don't know, I could not do in today's society dating. I would be so lost. I would be so turned around, like, with so much. I hear so many stories about girls that go on dates and with guys, and then they want to define the relationship talk. That's such a big thing right now, a big topic that I hear about. And girls think that they're dating, and guys are like, no, we're just hanging out, even though they've been on 3-4 plus dates. And it's like, okay, what are you aiming for? Like, for me, dating means you're trying to date someone to see if you want to marry them or not. That's the purpose of dating. That's also why yes, it sucked to have to wait till I was 16, but I so understand it, and I'm so thankful for it now. And we will probably have a similar, if not the same, rules for our children as well. Because the purpose of dating is to find the person you're going to marry. And I'm sorry, but you're not going to marry someone when you start dating at 10, 11, 12 years old. Like, very, very, very rarely does that actually happen. And obviously, yes, Caleb and I knew each other then, and we were talking. We were just friends. And like I said, that year before we actually started dating officially, that year we used to talk and get to know each other and become best friends. And when you build that relationship on a best friend level first, you're best friends, and then you start dating and you build that dating and that intimacy in dating, not intimacy like marriage intimacy, but that intimacy with dating and actually getting to know each other on a different level than being best friends. It's so different, and it literally sets the groundwork and the ground floor for your marriage. And that's why I feel like we have had a successful marriage and successful almost 9.5 years, and haven't had any blow up fights or and another thing, like, for us, we never throw around the D word. Like, we have never once in our marriage ever said, I want a divorce, or
even joked about it. We don't even joke about it.
We do not joke about it. That is not, we call it the D word, because we don't even bring it up. It's not, when we got married, we said vows to each other, for better or worse, till death do us part. Like, we are together forever. Whatever comes our way, we will figure it out. And trust me, we have been through a lot of hard things in 9 years. And it a lot of times has sucked, and we've been through many seasons in those 9 years of our marriage. There's been a lot of ups and downs, and that's just life. That's marriage. You're going to go through that, but we know at the end of the day we're on the same team, and we're going to get through it together, whatever it is. And that's what brings us closer together also. And so I guess that would be it. Is just like, if you're in today's society and you're trying to find the one, you're still dating, like, or maybe you're dating a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whatever, and you're wondering if they're the one, like, sit down and have those hard conversations. Don't wait until after you're married to talk about finances, to talk about sex, to talk about your future, to talk about how many kids you want, like, those types of topics. Like, talk about those as soon as you start dating someone, because if you're dating them to try to get to know that if you want to marry them, that should be one of the first things you talk about. Because if you're not aligned on those things, why are you even dating them? What is the purpose of that going to be for you? Because if you don't see eye to eye, you're clearly not going to get married. And if you do get married, you're going to have a lot of trouble, a lot of hardships in your marriage, a lot of arguments and fights over that. And so I guess that would just be my thing, is like, if you are dating someone or looking to date someone, have those hard conversations early.
Yeah.
Start it early, because then it's out of the way, and then you don't have to worry about that. Then you could go on, enjoy dating, enjoy, and know that you're on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a long-winded answer, but that's what I would say.
Yeah, well, I'll wrap up behind. No, my advice would be very similar. You have to keep God first in the relationship. Like me and Cam have always said that I will always love God more than I love you. That's not a diss. Like I know that sounds like it's a harsh thing to say, but you got to keep God first. And that's the thing I think a lot of couples are missing today. Sometimes we place relationships on a pedestal over God, and honestly, our relationships become our God sometimes. And I believe that if you keep God first, you can both keep God first. I think that's your biggest priority. Second thing, like Cami said, is to communicate. Have those conversations. I'm not a tough conversation type person. You can ask Cami, but set expectations, especially in dating. How many kids do you want? That's something that so many people, I get amazed. They get married and they're like, yeah, we were on different pages. He wanted no kids and I wanted kids, and that's why we got. And it's like that doesn't make sense. Like that should be a conversation that happens before. Like, and then same thing with money. Like Cami was a saver, I was a spender. We had to talk that out. Like, hey, what's our money expectations when we get married? Granted, we waited for marriage for marital intimacy is the word we'll use, but we still talked a little bit beforehand about, hey, what's expectation. We went to premarital counseling. Yes. Like that's a big thing. I'm a huge supporter of is premarital counseling. And honestly, we went to a pastor that didn't know us. We were strangers to that pastor because we know a lot of pastors, and we didn't want anybody who knew us to go through our premarital counseling
or our families
or family. Yeah, and so we found a pastor that didn't know us. We didn't know him, and then did premarital counseling, and it was just huge to be able to talk out stuff. What's your expectation with kids? What's your expectation with money? What are your, I guess you could almost say, what are your faults? Like, and the pastor would kind of look at us from an outside perspective and say, hey, these are the things I think you guys are going to have to work through in your marriage. And it was just really uplifting. And so I would say keep God first, and then just always communicate. Like whether you're dating, whether you're in marriage and you haven't had this, like don't be afraid to have those conversations. And so
I have one more thing to add to that I forgot. Another thing that I would say is something that we have always done, and I know this is kind of a heated debate with a lot of people, but we believe in putting each other first above our children.
Yep.
So in our marriage, basically how it goes is God first, then each other, then our kids.
Yep.
Our marriage will always come before our children, because if we don't have a good marriage, they are not going to have a good life, because they have to have that mother and father to look up to say, those are our parents. They love each other. We might go through hard times. We might have hard struggles, but our parents are always going to be together. They're always going to love each other. Even if they're having a hard season or going through something, they still love each other. And we know that, and we feel that, and we see that. And so we always will put our marriage above our kids. And that's why we believe in prioritizing date nights and getting away from the kids and having that alone time. That's why we have set bedtimes, and we're strict about it for putting the kids down at night every night, because we want that alone time for just us to reconnect, to talk about our day, to talk through any struggles that we're going through, to just laugh together, to just have that time. Like that is so important in a marriage, especially when you have children.
Agreed. And honestly, like if that wears out of whack with God, marriage and kids, like your kids, your marriage is what your kids are going to expect out of their future marriage too. Yeah. And so it's important for your marriage to be above them, so they know what a good example is. They know what they know what a healthy relationship looks like. They know how to work through adversity with your significant other. And so they've seen it played out in a godly way. And so I agree. I think that's super important, is kind of, we believe in that umbrella tier of God first, marriage second, kids third, and it'll always be that way. So.
All right. Well, we should probably wrap it up there, since it's almost at an hour. We don't want to keep you too much longer, but anyways, we appreciate so much for everyone that's listening. Please like, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review. We appreciate it so much.
And everybody who's left a review so far or listened, I just want to thank you guys again.
Yes,
I know thank you. Honestly, this kicked off way bigger than we thought it would with just our intro episode. And so we're excited to get more into these longer, in-depth episodes, and excited to share kind of our life and pieces of advice with you guys along the way. And so we pray blessings upon you guys as you guys go through your week. And we're excited to continue this podcast journey with you.
Yeah. And we will see you next week.
See you next week, guys.
Bye.
Bye bye.